Welcome to the CondoVultures.com podcast with your host, Peter Zalewski, a Miami real estate broker, Wall Street consultant, and expert witness. This podcast is focused on identifying real estate buying opportunities in the South Florida condo market of Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. The CondoVultures.com podcast is not authorized by the South Florida real estate industry and will most likely annoy many of the region's talking heads. This podcast will feature straight talk and salty language that could be offensive to some. Please remember that past investment success does not determine future gains, especially in South Florida's volatile condo market. For more information, please visit CondoVultures.com. Don't buy a South Florida condo, discounted or distressed, before taking a Condo Vultures correction tour. CondoVultures.com offers weekly bus and walking tours that focus on educating buyers on the how-tos of identifying discounted condos, analyzing the opportunities, and purchasing units. Every tour attendee receives a list of all condo projects in a particular market, a market assessment handout, and unmatched expert analysis. For more information on the condo correction tours, please visit condovultures.eventbrite.com.
This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. And I wanted to alert you that if you have a property that you're looking to sell in the Tri-County, South Florida area, I would encourage you to reach out to Jenny Cortez, a licensed real estate broker with cvrrealty.com. She's my partner. She's been in the business for north of 15 years. More importantly, she knows the market. She knows how to get a deal done. And she also realizes that it's more important to get a price that you can accept and sell the property rather than to hold firm on some price that's never going to be achieved and ultimately languish on the market. So if you're looking to do a deal that you want a skilled expert who can help you sell a property, reach out to Jenny Cortez at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859, or visit her website, cvrrealty.com. Welcome to Miami Reporters Roundtable podcast. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski from Condo Vultures. If you're listening to this podcast, you're going to hear a conversation by current and former journalists talking about some of the biggest stories that have occurred in the South Florida real estate market, as well as the economy. How does this program work? Well, basically, I pick some stories. I send them off to journalists. I ask them to go ahead and give us some feedback, cut through some of the fluff that's out there in the marketplace, and help you, the audience, understand what's really going on. Who is our audience? Well, we're a podcast that is targeting, or I guess made for, developers, lenders, investors, sellers, and even gadflies. So if you're somebody who likes to go to a cocktail party, you want something interesting to say that's different than everyone else, we might be the podcast for you. So, we encourage you to subscribe to our podcast. We also encourage you to like our podcast. All that being said, let me go ahead and introduce you to our panel this week. We have a gentleman who's a journalist for over 25 years. Right now, he has a public relations marketing firm here in Miami. His name is John Gruss. The name of his company is Gruss Communications. You can check him out on his website, GrussPR.com, GRUSSPR.com. You can also get him on X, which is formerly Twitter. Get him at Jean Gruss, JeanGurss. What's going on, Mr. Gruss, and how's the diving?
Hey, thanks, Peter. It's going great. Hey, listen, if you're a gadfly and you're repeating what we say, you might get kicked out of those cocktail parties.
Who else do we have on the podcast this week? We have a gentleman who was a journalist for over 20 years, originally from Long Island, New York. Someone else with John Fakler. John spent his time as over 20 years as a journalist. He wrote about white collar crime. He did business stories. He also did restaurant reviews. And I would encourage anybody to go ahead, do a clip search for some of his restaurant reviews. Are just tantalizing. Mr. Fakler, if anybody wants to get a hold of him, they can get him on Twitter at JT Fakler, Fakler. What's going on, Mr. Fakler?
Peter, I'm very glad to be back on the unauthorized podcast. If you do a clip search for my restaurant reviews, you're going to have to go back a long way, maybe 30 years. I do not write any more about restaurant reviews. However, if you're opening a restaurant, you need some good press, give me a call.
Press, give him a call. Interesting. And who else do we have on the podcast this week? We have a journalist. She's been a journalist for over 20 years. Right now, she's a freelance reporter. She covers real estate and finance. She also has a newsletter that's called Highest and Best. You can get it on Beehive. Anybody doesn't know what Beehive is, basically, it is it's a website that provides for journalists and author to go ahead and publish their work. So remember, look for highestandbest.beehive, which is BEEHIIV.com. We're going to go ahead. We're going to put that in the show notes. We're also going to have it listed or shown on this screen. So it's no one else but Oshrat Carmiel. Welcome to the Miami Reporters Roundtable podcast, and welcome to your maiden voyage.
Happy to be here as the representative of the Northern Territory of Boca. I'm happy that you're including me in the Miami Roundtable.
We were happy to have you. And what I failed to mention is that if anybody wants to get you on X, which is formerly Twitter, they can get you spelling your name, which is Oshrat Carmiel. You're actually an active user of X or Twitter. I always see your postings there. I've been following you for quite some time, and we're delighted to have you on this podcast. Since you're making your maiden voyage, and this is our 4th season of the podcast, we do have a regular following. So, Oshrat, can you give everybody like an overview, just kind of about, how you got into journalism and what it's like living in Boca Raton, where Mr. Fakler used to live for quite some time?
Well, I started actually journalism as a political reporter. I did not cover real estate. Moved to Bloomberg. Started Bloomberg in September 2008. When the financial world was falling apart, and I kind of learned everything from kind of the bottom up. After Lehman melted down, they asked me if I wanted to cover real estate or insurance, and really, what would you choose? So, and so I started covering New York real estate in January of 2009. So really, the bottom up through the recession, and then through kind of a luxury boom in New York, and then eventually I made my way down here about 18 months ago, and essentially half of the world that I used to cover in New York is here. So it's like I, on some level, never left. So it's a continuation a little bit of my old beat.
Wow, interesting. I got a couple questions for you. Something that I always wondered. Back in the day when you had the Bloomberg terminals, anybody doesn't know what the Bloomberg terminals are, there'd be information that was put out basically by the Bloomberg network and traders, because this was actionable information. They'd pay a premium. I always heard it's 20, 25 grand just to be able to get one of these terminals in order to access that information. Any truth to that? Or
Yes.
Is this like hyperbole?
That I don't remember the exact, and it's changed. It's a commitment. But what you get with it is you get everything. You get every bit of financial data. You get real time stocks, and you can't pick and choose. You get everything, and you get news. But that's how you got me as a news reporter. Is you pay that. You pay that amount
amazing.
per month. But,
That's cool.
But it's an amazing tool if you have a chance to use it. I that was one of the nice things I would do. I would show people like access to the Bloomberg terminal and show them cocoa prices and like juxtapose them against like gold, and
Wow.
and make
Wow.
So it was truly a remarkable device, and the fact that people pay it just shows its value.
I'm sure. Another question I have, Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg was the mayor of New York City. Michael Bloomberg is the founder of the Bloomberg, what would you call it? The system, the financial services?
Bloomberg.
I mean, it seems like he's got a finger in everything.
Well, I mean, it's Bloomberg LP, so it basically is the system. But in the time since it started off as a data service, then became a financial product service. I mean, it does a lot of other things, and then a news service. There's obviously a philanthropy arm. It's basically a lot of things at this point, and I think it's 1980 was when it founded. So we're talking about 40 years plus.
Wow. And I'm wondering, and this is your opportunity to name drop. Did you ever meet Michael Bloomberg? And if so, what's your take on him?
He's great. I mean, no, he was mayor for most of the time when I first started. I met him very briefly. He's busy. So it's not like not like we hung, but a wonderful guy. But his presence is felt in the organization. It's a very well run, well managed, and just data driven organization. So even if you haven't met him, you met him because that's his imprint. I mean, it's a very well honed and well run organization.
Nice. Well, this is going to be a fantastic podcast, and we are delighted to have you on. So let's get to a little couple of housekeeping things before we go ahead and we get into our 6 stories that I handpicked. This is new. This might be news to you, Oshrat, but what we're doing now is in this season we're actually selling merchandise. So we have a situation with a company, a good situation with a company. Basically, we take screenshots from our podcast. We go ahead and we can put it on different merchandise, whether it's flip flop, whether it, I think they call them sliders now, whether they're throw pillows or welcome mats, or coffee mugs, or t-shirts, all that type of stuff. And we look just like Marvel looks at the superheroes that it's created fictionally, and they go ahead and they sell product. We're trying to do the same thing with our journalists who we think are superheroes, because there's some of the fluff out there that some of the public relations people put out. So if anybody wants to buy any of our product, we're not making a lot of money on. We're just using it for marketing purposes. And I will tell you, we also do shower curtains. So anybody wants a shower curtain first thing in the morning, you're sort of, you're stumbling around, it's still dark outside, you put on the light. You can get a shower curtain with Mr. Fakler on it. Big image of Mr. Fakler first thing in the morning. So that will definitely wake you up. Might scare you if you get up in the middle of the night to use the go in the bathroom for whatever purpose. But basically, anybody wants merchandise, you now can get it on condovultures.com, condovultures.com. We have a brand new website or a revised website that's come online, and we have an area for merch. So you can go ahead, you can check it out there. So all the journalists that we have on the podcast, we go ahead and we deem them our superheroes, and we make that available. The other little bit of housekeeping I throw out there for anybody is if you want to ask us a question, you want to criticize, go ahead and get us on X, which is formerly Twitter. You get us at Miami RRP, at Miami RRP, stands for Miami Reporters Roundtable Podcast. It is not AARP, which is for those people who are a little bit senior, a little long in the tooth. We are Miami RRP. So that's an easy way to remember. Send us any comments, any questions, anything like that. And then finally, we're not taking breaks for our podcast right now. So we have one sponsor. And who is that sponsor? It's actually my real estate brokerage firm. It's called Condo Vultures Realty, Condo Vultures Realty. You can get us at condovulturesrealty.com. We do buy-side brokerage. We do consulting. We also do expert witness. So anybody out there who paid too much for a condo and you want to sue somebody, give us a call. If the numbers add up, we might be able to go ahead and work on your behalf in your lawsuit. So all that being said, let's go ahead and we'll get to our stories. Story number one, we're going to go to Jean Gruss. Jean, I'm going to read you the headline. I'm going to read you the first couple graphs that I want you to comment on this particular piece. So here we go with the headline. Headline, once valued at $4 billion, Miami crypto company announces layoffs. Yuga Labs is downsizing as part of a company restructuring. The Miami blockchain startup is laying off an unspecified number of people as it shifts strategy. CEO Daniel L. Gary said in a letter to employees on October 6th, the decision came after a recent meeting between Yuga Labs leadership team and New York City. L. Gray, who was appointed chief executive last December, said the firm needed to narrow its vision and focus on projects aligned to long-term goals. And here is a quote from the letter. It says, I realized very quickly that we were in a number of projects that, while well-intentioned, either spread the team too thin or required execution expertise beyond our core competencies. In a post on social media platform X, which is previously known as Twitter, co-founder Greg Solano said Yuga Labs still has more than 120 employees after the layoffs. Mr. Gruss, during the pandemic, we heard a lot about crypto. We saw what's going on with the Wall Street Bets boys. There's a movie out right now on GameStop. Everybody was piling into crypto. The mayor of Miami, who's term limited out, a gentleman called Francis Suarez, he was out there beating the drum. We now have a Bitcoin bull that's been set up right outside Miami-Dade College and possibly fittingly right across from the federal prison, a holding cell, if you will, for some of these Bitcoin types. And I will mention our arena down here in Miami where the Miami Heat plays, where a lot of concerts go on. It used to be called the American Airlines Arena. Everybody knows the AAA. Then lo and behold, a gentleman out of the Bahamas, Sam Bankman-Fried, he bought the naming rights. He changed the name of the arena from the AAA of the American Airlines Arena to the FTX Arena before he was indicted, extradited from the Bahamas. Right now, he is on trial in the United States for a whole variety of financial type of situations. So, Mr. Gruss, I'm wondering, how did everything go so bad? And I thought blockchain and I thought crypto was the key to Mayor Francis Suarez's pitch as part of his Miami coin to really be Miami's going to be the Mecca.
You really thought that, Peter? Come on, man. Well, interestingly, Yuga Labs was part of this. Actually, it's not a crypto company. It's a blockchain technology. Blockchain. Yeah. In fact, the headline is a little misleading. But they were behind the Bored Apes. If you'll remember, these are digital artwork that was sold as quote non-fungible tokens. That expression
NFTs.
I still don't. Yeah, NFTs, non-fungible tokens. So, and that whole market basically crashed last year. So, I'm a little surprised that it's taken this long for companies like that to sort of start retrenching. Although, they raised a phenomenal amount of money. They raised $450 million from investors. So I guess the money's running out. In a sort of a larger sense, it's, for Miami, it's too bad because all these crypto blockchain companies, NFTs and all of that stuff, that's old news now. Now we have AI and, unfortunately, a lot of the companies that were involved in the crypto and NFTs and blockchain and all that, those are kind of falling by the wayside. in terms of they're out of favor in the investment world now. So there's really no more money for these guys. Investors are really not interested in them. And then their money's running out and they're retrenching. So, this is what's happening, unfortunately. And, Miami benefited certainly, during the pandemic and shortly thereafter from the NFT craze and the crypto craze and the blockchain craze. But now that the money's running out, unfortunately, this is what happens with tulip bulb kind of moments, investors piling into, schemes and scams.
So Oshrat, let me ask you a question. You moved down to South Florida roughly about 18 months ago or so. You came from New York City. Yep. Could you sort of give us some perspective about what it was like back then when Miami Mayor Francis Suarez was beating the drum about how Miami was and Mayor Suarez was actually competing with the mayor of New York City as to who was going to be the crypto capital of the world. What do you recall, and who do you think ultimately won in terms of being the crypto capital of the United States?
I have to say, I left in between administrations of New York.
Okay.
So I left in between the tail end of de Blasio, and I was here already. So it's hard to say. I mean, I'm not sure if I have the answer because I stopped following the crypto world in New York. I mean, if it involved leasing offices, maybe Florida won. I guess isn't Wynwood now pitching itself as a crypto office mecca? But problem is if can you pay your office lease in tulip bulbs if that's what we're talking about? So yeah, I think that's the question if you're if you're trying to lease office space in Wynwood. But I guess for a while I would say Miami.
Okay, all right. Well, I guess Miami won, but the Miami coin did not win. At some point, the mayor of Miami said that so much money is going to be made off of the Miami coin, which was a token created specifically for Miami, that residents of the city would actually be like shareholders who got back a dividend and wouldn't have to pay much of their taxes because the Miami coin was going to go ahead and compensate everybody, and that's why we should all invest in it. So that being said, story number 2, Mr. Fakler, John Fakler, we're going to go to you with story number 2. This is kind of a combo story. The premier story is going to be coming out of the Miami New Times, but then I'm gonna follow that up with a piece that's coming out of one of the local TV channels here. So, Mr. Fakler, I'll read you the headline, first couple graphs, and then I want you to comment. Here we go. Headline: Miami New Times. Juvia restaurant has closed its Miami Beach location. Will reopen at Miami World Center. Anybody doesn't know, South Beach is a neighborhood in the municipality, which is called Miami Beach. It's located on a barrier island. You go over about a 5-mile causeway to the west. You go over Biscayne Bay and you end up on the mainland, and there's where you got the city of Miami. And there's a neighborhood of the city of Miami right in the greater downtown Miami area called World Center. So basically, this restaurant is going from South Beach, which is a very popular neighborhood of Miami Beach, internationally known, over to the mainland into downtown Miami in a place called Miami World Center. So again, Juvia Restaurant has closed its Miami Beach location, will reopen at Miami World Center. The iconic South Beach restaurant will reopen in 2024 as part of a downtown mixed-use development. That's the subhead. And first couple graphs from Mr. Fakler. Juvia, the longtime Miami Beach restaurant known for its expansive outdoor patio and Miami skyline views, has shuttered its doors. The restaurant closed for business on Thursday, August 31st. The closure, however, is not permanent. Instead, the iconic South Beach establishment, set on Lincoln Road, has announced that it will relocate to Miami World Center, the $6 billion, 27-acre mixed-use development currently underway in downtown Miami. So Juvia first opened its doors in Miami Beach in 2012 when it introduced a unique collaboration of cuisine set against a stunning backdrop of Miami skylines. Departing from its longtime location, the family-run landmark establishment, I don't know if a decade constitutes a landmark, but we'll go with it. The family-run landmark establishment by Juvia Group, a hospitality collective spearheaded by restaurateurs Jonas and Alexandra Milan, has signed a lease to secure a space at the new project situated in the city's urban core. Mr. Fakler, what do you make of the fact that this rooftop restaurant in Miami Beach, right on Lincoln Road, which is a pedestrian mall, is basically shut up shop and is moving over to downtown Miami? I thought everybody wants to go to South Beach. I thought South Beach is internationally known. I thought that the condo prices are as high as they are because everybody wants to be there. We have this restaurant that is a landmark after 11 years. They're bailing on the beach and they're moving to the mainland. What do you make of that, Mr. Fakler?
Well, I know, Peter, you're being sarcastic. So what's happening, if you go to the kicker quote in the story,
Okay.
for those non-journalists out there, it means at the very end, Jonas, he cites the reason for moving. He cites changes in foot traffic and the overall environment. Anybody who reads between the lines will know what that means. That means things are slowing down because of an incredible influx of crime. People are getting shot at the cafes. Hooligans are running amok during music festivals. It's just not a friendly environment for businesses, retail, restaurants. So, they're essentially cutting bait and fleeing from South Beach to go to downtown, which there's obviously a big influx of retail. I know the Miami World Center, I believe, is 95% leased. So there's certainly a move there of businesses, which is kind of ironic because it used to be you want to leave the city to go to the beach. Things are much more laid back. Now we seem like we have the opposite happening.
So, Mr. Fakler, I want to ask you a follow-up question, but let me just clarify.
Yeah.
Anybody who lives in Miami Beach or loves Miami Beach and is pissed off at Mr. Fakler for making these delegations, his X handle, which is formerly Twitter, at JT Fakler, Fakler. No, Mr. Fakler, I will say my Miami World Center has been in the process of being built since roughly about 2004, 2005. Right now, it's basically a number of buildings that have been put up. Some of the retail is open. Not much of it is actually being consumed, if you will. If you walk by you walk by the stores, including like Lululemon, there's nobody in them. So I'm sure they're building towards a critical mass. So I just want to put that on the record for anybody on the beach who's going to be bitching about downtown Miami. But you did make a comment about crime, and this is where the second story comes in. And I just want to sort of lend some statistics to what you're saying. This is coming out of NBC6. This is the local affiliate down here. Headline: Miami Beach amongst most dangerous Florida cities. Weston is the safest, according to FBI data. Subhead: the list of violent crime analyzed include murder and non-negligent manslaughter, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault. I'll read a couple graphs from Mr. Fakler. Then I want you to follow up on the crime side. Living in South Florida, you may think that you live in a safe neighborhood, but do you? Personal injury attorneys from injuredflorida.com analyze the official figures from the FBI to determine which of Florida's 65 most populous cities are statistically the most dangerous to live in. Using the latest available data, the study was able to determine which cities have a higher rate of violent crime per 100,000 people. The list of violent crimes consists of murder and non-negligent manslaughter, rape, robbery, and aggravated assaults. Based on the data, here are the most dangerous cities, and I will simply go through it. And what we're seeing here based on the data is Daytona Beach is number 1, Homestead is number 2, Miami Beach is number 3, Fort Myers would be 4, and West Palm Beach would be number 5. So again, anybody who's going to listen to this podcast and say, wow, Miami Beach is safe, not according to the statistics coming out from this particular organization. Mr. Fakler, what do you make of that?
Well, if you drill down a little bit further in the statistics from this study, although Miami Beach is rated number 3 or ranked number 3, it's actually ranked number 2 for robberies. So it goes back to what I said earlier that, there's robberies happening everywhere. There's stick-ups, there's shootings. I mean, I'm not trying to make it sound like the Wild West, but it's certainly leaning towards that way because the robbery statistic actually, I kind of hung out to me even more than the overall violent crime.
Interesting. Jean or Oshrat, either of you would like to comment? I mean, if you remember during the pandemic, there was a lot of publicity internationally about some of the, how Florida had basically no mask. People could come down here. Spring breakers came down. There were all kinds of situations occurring. And I'm not talking about torquing on top of police cars. But either of you have any comment about this?
Well, I do wonder. I mean, I don't go to South Beach anymore, for that and other reasons. But I have noticed that other retailers have left South Beach. So, I mean, they're certainly not if you go to Lincoln Road, there were a lot of empty storefronts. The other thing about spring break is, we didn't used to have spring break. And, I think, my suspicion is, that we've had, influx of, discount airlines into, Miami International Airport, like Spirit and Southwest and JetBlue. And, Florida was actually one of the few places that was open during the pandemic. And so, basically it was like open doors. So, Miami Beach invited this, and they really have only themselves to blame. So, I mean, they let it get out of control, and this is the result. I mean, retailers and restaurants and shops are deciding to leave. And I'm sure the rents too are not cheap, I mean, I don't know what kind of rents they're getting in downtown Miami, but they're probably getting, some concessions to move in. So, it's going to be interesting to see.
Interesting. Okay.
I'll just add one thing. I mean, I think just sort of coming from New York and realizing the relationship between offices that people go to and, retail success. You are seeing, offices that are relatively well attended, new offices rising. So I can see that, you have, if you're moving down to World Center, I mean, you have, new residences, you have offices. I mean, your potential for different types of foot traffic at different times probably increases.
That's a great point. Okay, story number 3, Oshrat Carmiel. We're going to go to you with this piece. This will be thinking about New York Post, and you actually wrote the story, so you might not be able to comment, but you can probably provide some insight for us. New York Post. I'll read you the headline and read you the first couple graphs, and I want you to just provide any kind of insight you can. Headline: How South Florida is winning the nation's real estate war. First couple graphs. It's a boom time in South Florida. In downtown Miami, ground is being cleared for Florida's tallest office tower, 1.4 million square feet, to be filled by firms that have yet no actual presence in the state. Condo towers branded as the St. Regis and the Waldorf Astoria are also planned for the area. Their completion is years away, but their unbuilt units are largely claimed with buyer deposits. The same thing further north in West Palm Beach, where the arrival of financial giants such as Goldman Sachs and BlackRock set office rents to record highs during the second quarter of this year. Now, new workplaces with private terraces and access to yacht charters are rising along the city's waterfront, with builders plan condos for those future employees. Oshrat, what the hell is going on? Why is everybody still coming? During the pandemic, people moved down here because the state of Florida basically was very open. It didn't have the mask issue that you found in other parts of the state, even the world. So everybody came here. But now I thought everybody's going back to the office and they can't live in South Florida. But yet your story is saying that they all still want a piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the question that was sought to answer is like, is it over? But if you look at the development, at least the development, the answer that by developers and investors is no. Not only is it not over, we're building for people who aren't even here yet. We're planning on them coming. I mean, I think that was generally the theme of the story. And yet, you have condos that are not going to be done till 2027 and are now mostly have deposits on them. So we looked at that, and we looked at the fact that, other pandemic boom towns like Austin are not doing so well, Phoenix not doing so well. So no, the people are still coming here. I think that they're either not going back to the office or they're going back to the office part-time and going to the office here the other part of the time. I mean, the kind of the symbiosis with like New York and Florida is still happening. I mean, I think the idea is that you could just pick an office, and I think people are picking it here. I mean, I know that's part of what brought us down here.
No. Oshrat, in your piece, and let me bring this up, and then I want you to comment. Basically, everybody says down here in Florida, 1,000 people a day are moving to Florida, 1,000 people a day. I've been here for 30 years, and every year they said 1,000 people a day. They never say how many are leaving, but they always say 1,000 a day are coming. So in your piece, it says Florida is the number one destination for professionals aged 25 to 36, earning at least $200,000, according to a recent report by financial advisory firm Smart Assets. Most crucially, high earners arriving in Florida have outnumbered those departing by over 3 to 1 in recent years. And along with youth and jobs, the newcomers are coming with cash, snapping up homes in a state that doesn't have nearly enough of them. Oshrat, how much of this do you think has to do with the fact that during the pandemic, people got accustomed to telecommuting, if you will, working from home? And now, because of technology and because of this more openness or acceptance of it, people can actually be based out of Florida or South Florida in particular, and they can work for a firm out of New York and California. Is that the driving force? Or is there something else, maybe quality of life? People got spooked by everyone they saw dying and the numbers of people dying. And maybe they said, screw it, I'm in now. Let me live the quality of life. So what did you find out when you were reporting?
I think it's both. I mean, I think on one level, if you work for a major financial firm, and your financial firm's opening up an office in Florida, you can go back to the office and still live in Florida. In some cases, you had people who were already here, and the employers looked and said, gosh, half my staff is already down here. Might as well just take up an office space. So, yeah, I mean, I think your finding is that once you did live down here for a year, you don't really want to go back to the way it was. I I think back to the way things were, and you say, wow, how did I live without palm trees? How did I live without access to water every day? So I think it's that, but I think that firms are making that possible. I mean, and when I look around, I mean, anecdotes aren't data, but when you look around to all the other New Yorkers that I meet, everybody is working here part of the time, commuting to New York sometimes every other week, or California every other week, and I think that that's just an acceptable way to split your time. And so if it is, then why not make Florida your primary residence? I mean, if you can. So
it's interesting. Mr. Fakler, I want to go to you based on a quote that comes out of Oshrat's piece. This quote's coming from Ken H. Johnson. He's a housing economist with Florida Atlantic University. Mr. Fakler, you got to Florida in the 1980s, okay? So let me just set the scene. Here's the quote from Mr. Johnson, the professor. The old 1980s Florida is disappearing. And he goes on to say, we're not just getting those retirement communities, fixed income folks we're used to. We're getting people with significant incomes, and they usually are bringing in work and jobs with them. Mr. Fakler, can you speak on behalf of those people from the 80s who lived in South Florida, and how much has it changed?
Well, first of all, it was the late 80s. Don't age me too much.
All right.
No, I think I made the comment previously that, I came down here. You had maybe 5 blocks on South Beach that were, livable. It was cheap. You could buy a condo for 35 grand. And certainly you could make it on a lower salary. So as far as this $200,000 number, someone didn't send me the memo. I mean, those kind of numbers, I mean, you talk about a difference. Back then it was you came to Florida to live a good life and live cheap. No longer the case.
And they used to call it the sunshine tax. You would make less, but yet you got the sunshine in return. And that was sort of the trade-off. That's what people used to say. John Gruss, we're going to go to you with story number 4, John. This piece is coming out of The Real Deal. I'll read you the headline. I'll read you the first couple of graphs. And I want you to comment, John. Here we go. Kushner picks up distressed Surfside site from Bowling Green and lender. Subhead, Kushner worked with seller and Fuse Group to arrange a $40 million deal. Anybody who doesn't know what Bowling Green is basically it's an entity that began investing here in a big way prior to the Great Recession when we had our run up. Bowling Green came down here. They were then working. A lot of people knew them as Africa Israel. They bought up a bunch of dirt. Market went to shit. They ended up only putting up one tower called the Marquee and graded onto Miami and Biscayne Boulevard. Basically gave up everything else. Crescent Heights, which is a big investment group down here. They do a lot of rentals. They bought most of the portfolio, and Crescent Heights is now building a tower on the former Africa Israel / Bowling Green site, which is right there at the tip of South Beach at 5th and Alden. So just a little bit of background. So John, going back to the piece, subhead, Kushner worked with seller and Fuse Group to arrange $40 million deal. And here's the first couple graphs. Kushner Companies paid $40 million for a distressed development site in Surfside. Sources told The Real Deal. New York-based Kushner worked with the seller, Shayav Bowling Green, and the lender, Fuse Group, to assume the debt and buy the property at 9300 Talons Avenue. The deal closed on Tuesday afternoon, the sources said. Kushner, led by Charles Kushner, his daughter Nicole Kushner-Meyer, and Laurent Morali, plan a luxury rental development. The vacant property is zoned for about 100 units with maximum building height of about 3 stories. Kushner could not be immediately reached for comment. Bowling Green's Eden Surfside LLC sold a 2.9-acre site, which is on the west side of Collins Avenue. The non-waterfront property faces the Fendi Chateau residences. For anybody who kind of knows that area. John, is this the beginning of the distressed real estate market?
Well, I mean, I think it's a little misleading to say it was distressed. The seller had purchased it for what, 25 million?
26.5 million, according to the story.
And they sold it for 40 million. I mean, I'm not quite sure why you would call that a distressed sale. I mean, it just, and a lot of money for just under 3 acres, right? And you can only build 100 units on there. So I don't know. There's a lot of unanswered questions. It didn't seem like a distressed sale to me. Maybe the seller is distressed in other ways that we don't know. So there's probably a backstory to that, which I have no idea. But the other question I had was, how deep is the luxury market? I mean, this is just yet another luxury rental or luxury residential developments. And maybe after listening to what Oshrat said a little earlier, maybe there is a market for the yet, yet to be arrived new residents. But I'm just curious how deep the market is for luxury rentals, and certainly if you're going to pay those kinds of prices, I mean, they're going to have to charge quite a bit. So there's going to have to be, I mean, this better be a nice place.
No, John, let me ask you a follow-up question. Legislation went into effect in July called Live Local Act. Basically, if 40% of the units are earmarked for affordable housing of some sort, a developer is able to build to the height of within a radius of a mile in terms of the tallest and maximum density. John, can you see, based on this purchase price, can you see anything tied to Live Local Act here, given the fact that the property is not waterfront? It's located effectively between two main streets. I'd almost call it like a median, if you will. It's kind of in the middle. If you're on the Florida Turnpike, you pull off to get some gas, you use the restroom, you get something to eat, and then you continue on. That's kind of what this location's like from an unauthorized podcast perspective. So do you see Live Local Act involved?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. I mean, I think 40% of the units would have to be reserved for affordable housing, which is a sort of a test on the average income in the area, right? And I mean, I mean, affordable housing, in Miami Beach would be, I don't know, it'd be let's say a lot more expensive than affordable housing, say in Kendall or somewhere else. It seems to me that we're at sort of the end of the cycle. With interest rates being where they are, the residential boom has, lasted pretty long time. And I would say we're a little closer to the end than we are at the beginning. And I'm still puzzled why developers are making these kinds of bets on the market, given this, where we are in the cycle, especially with real estate, with interest rates. And the prospects of a slowing economy.
Interesting. I'm wondering if you have any comments, because you've spoken to some developers and some investors who are very bullish on the area.
The general take that I get is bullishness. I mean, I think a lot of the folks who are buying, whether the market is there or not, but I think that this market is done almost entirely in cash, right? So mortgage rates are at this point irrelevant. I mean. That's what I keep hearing, is a sort of bullishness. I haven't seen the site, but at some point, right? I mean, the music does stop everywhere. I mean, for me, I'm relatively new here, but I wrote about this in New York, where it just became one luxury condo after another, and for a while, it really felt like the demand was insatiable because you had this global market, and at some point, there were just too many. Don't know when that time is, but I imagine we'll know. I imagine it's coming at some point.
Story number 5, we're going to go to John Fakler. Mr. Fakler, I want to read you the headline, first couple graphs, and I want you to go ahead and comment. This is coming out of Bloomberg. Headline: Airbnb is fundamentally broken. The CEO says he plans to fix it. And here we go. Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky hasn't had an easy 2023. First, there was the Airbnb bust frenzy in March, in which hosts took up arms on Twitter, now known as X, about shrinking profit margins and a potential short-term rental bubble. Then competitors Vrbo beat Airbnb to feature that customers have long requested with a loyalty program. And in September, New York City vastly tightened its rules on short-term rentals, nearly squeezing Airbnb out of the market that in the early days represented about 80% of its business. Never mind the increasing strictness of return to office policies, which have hampered the flexibility and spurred Airbnb's business in the pandemic years. By mid-September, when he rolled out a handful of site improvements, it seemed that Chesky had found himself in a catch-22, caught between the conflicting demands of guests and hosts. Top of mind amongst them, guests want to spend less money and be guaranteed a better product, while hosts are worried about potential declines in bookings and their bottom lines. Mr. Fakler, a lot of people come to South Florida, they buy properties, they consider them to be Airbnb, whether or not they're zoned for it or not. They go ahead, they rent places by the night, they rent by the week. Some people rent out mansions and they throw parties. Mr. Fakler, too, you used to host an Airbnb. It wasn't permitted in the place you hosted it. You got some bad reviews, so you stopped doing it. So I'm just wondering if you could give us some perspective in terms of all these projects that are now for Airbnb is encouraged, as well as in situations like you had, where it's basically prohibited. What do you make of the fact that Airbnb is trying to fix its model? Can it fix its model? And do we have too many damn Airbnbs down here in South Florida?
Well, there's several things you got to look at here. And in full disclosure, Peter, you also dabbled in Airbnb.
I don't recall. I do not recall.
You don't recall. Okay. But listen, very similar to New York, we've got issues as well with regulations. Certain types of buildings, certain neighborhoods on Miami Beach, it's illegal. You can get fined. It's a criminal offense. So you've got that issue off to the side, which has kind of been there for a while. I think before New York came down with their regulations. But you've also got the economy, which is, this is dovetailing off of what John said earlier about the residential real estate market. No longer, it's not profitable anymore for investors who are buying buildings, maybe a second home, and doing a long-term rental. You're not seeing that as much, but also the short-term rentals like with Airbnb. So you've got that economic issue where guests are demanding actually better amenities. And then you have issues with the those people renting out as an Airbnb where it's not financial viable to do it anymore. Plus the bookings are lower because you've got tightened real estate inventory. So, there's several issues compiled on other issues where right now, certainly it's not a good business. I'm not sure, in the future or what, any changes he makes are going to change that. This is ultimately, he's doing what he can do to fix the situation. Maybe long-term there's a way out, but I don't short-term, because of the economy and real estate.
Mr. Fakler, let me ask you, we've had a run-up in inflation. The Federal Reserve is taking steps to try to calm down inflation. We also have a greed element here. How much of this has to do with the fact that hosts want more money and guests simply don't want to get ripped off like many Airbnbs seem to be doing down here in South Florida, where some Airbnb prices, if you go online and check it out, they're comparable to what they're charging in a hotel. The pictures are great, but then when you show up, there's some sort of hustle going on. So how much of this is greed versus the way it first started when it was more, kumbaya and people were sort of working together as more of a community rather than straight up greed where homes are being purchased with the intent of Airbnb being I'm out the entire time?
Well, I think that you've got a valid point there. I think that's actually true. I think it was more of a symbiotic relationship when it first started. I know when I did my B&B, I always jacked up the prices when there was like a music festival in town. And unfortunately, I had a few issues where, I won't go into the details, but, I had one visitor who lost a key, got into a fight on the beach. His mother called me. It was a nightmare. So, it was something that I know you had better luck than I did. Mine was pre-pandemic. You ran yours, I think, during the pandemic. So yeah, I think there's definitely a different change. It was much more symbiotic because you really needed each other in the early days of Airbnb.
Mr. Fakler, just to clarify, when I did Airbnb, it was prior to the pandemic, and I was renting out rooms in a home. You were in a 1-bedroom apartment, high rise. You were sleeping on your couch and running out your bedroom.
Wow.
Little did that
I didn't know what I was doing.
Little did that guest know when they walked out in the morning, you were laying on a love seat and you're about 6th floor with your legs strung all over the edges. So let's not compare my situation where I'm running out a room to your situation where you're couch surfing and you're renting out that room for $150 to $200 a night to somebody unbeknownstly who simply wanted to go to Ultra.
I got some bad reviews, let me tell you. I got the worst reviews probably ever in the history of Airbnb.
Hey, Peter.
Yes,
Peter. I think there's also another issue, which is I think there's an oversupply of Airbnbs.
Yes, yes.
And I think that's pretty clear. And so owners of Airbnbs or people who invested in condos and homes hoping to Airbnb and cover their nut are not able to do that. And the other thing too is, so you may recall, and we discussed this, I think in our first season, but the city of Miami Beach tried to impose regulations on short-term rentals and they were not successful.
Correct.
In fact, they tried to ban it and actually they lost. So it seems to me that Miami Beach is much more liberal about allowing short-term rentals and Airbnbs because basically they got spanked in court for trying to limit it.
That's right.
The opposite of New York. So I'm thinking Airbnbs are here to stay. And it seems that every condo project that's being built right now is sort of, marketed as a Airbnb potential. And, so it seems like the supply is still coming online.
And John, you had sent me a post on Twitter. Somebody else had posted it, and basically there were two maps. One showed listings, and the other one listings for sale. The other one showed properties
Airbnb.
Available for Airbnb. John, can you kind of sort of refer to that or provide?
Yeah,
some
it was
insight?
Broward County. Someone had created a map that showed with little red dots all the listings, and there were just a few for the listings. And then they counterimposed the Airbnb map, which was like a giant red blob. It was like tons of properties available for rent on Airbnb. It just showed, what the impact of Airbnb is, or short-term rentals are in this market. It's really stunning to see. It was pretty impressive.
Oshrat, would you like to offer anything about the Airbnb?
Yes, actually, I think on my newsletter a few weeks ago, I did a story about how the summer shook out for Airbnb owners in Florida markets, and it was pretty negative across, including Miami, Orlando, Fort Myers, and I mean, and it's not unique to Florida. I mean, it happened. A lot of the places that were popular with Airbnb locations suffered a lot this summer because of the oversupply. I mean, there's a company called AirDNA, which actually measures the number of units available at any given time of year and how that compares to the previous year. And they actually track rental rates by market. I mean, it's a pretty great data source. And and I think if I recall, in August, I think it was something like there were 12% more rentals across the U.S. in August of this year as opposed to last year. And I think if September, it was even close to 30%. And so what happened was, during the pandemic, 2021 was like the banner year for Airbnb, right? Nobody's going on vacation. Everybody's working from home. Let's find a beach. And then also interest rates are low. So get a friend, get a buddy. Let's go buy a couple of, we're all real estate geniuses and we're all going to go buy something, rent it out because, hey, in 2021, it's great. It was like full occupancy plus, right? Can't lose, never goes down. So but what's happening now is that 2022 is also okay, but 2023, and I did look at some of that data, was kind of a disappointing summer in a lot of markets. I think most markets in Florida went down, which really shocked me when I saw the chart. And so now, what do? You want to sell, you want to keep Airbnb. You're going to have to take a cut because interest rates are different now than they were before.
Yep.
So I think that, oversupply, and then as you say in Miami, right? I mean, every new project is all about putting your unit on Airbnb. So I think oversupply is a big issue. And maybe that relieves some of the inventory issues in the housing market when the Airbnb owners sell. But maybe that's the wave we're waiting for.
That's a great point, Oshrat. And I will point out to some of the audience, if you've never had the pleasure of living in South Florida for quite some time, we have a different type of economics of what you probably learned in if you went to uni or you went to high school. Typically, supply demand, you will adjust the pricing based on how much demand there is. Down here in South Florida, as you sell less, you charge more because the rationale is, let me try to get more off of this sucker because I can't necessarily sell it. So we tend to go the opposite of most economics classes that probably many members of our audience have learned along the way. So with that being said, we're going to go to story number 6. Oshrat Carmiel, we're going to go to you with this piece. This is actually coming out of your newsletter. It's posted on Beehive. And your newsletter is called Highest and Best. Anybody wants to check it out, we're going to have it in the show notes. We're also going to have it posted on the video. So if you're listening to audio, check out the video, but also go to the show notes. But let me just spell it out to you just in case. Highest, HIGHEST hyphen, and AND hyphen, best, BEST, like highest and best, beehive.com. BEEHIIV. BEEHIIV.com. So, Oshrat has her own newsletter. I'd encourage you to check it out, subscribe to it, and follow her on Twitter, or I should say X. So here we go with the headline, and then the first couple graphs, Oshrat, and then I want you to sort of provide some comment. Headline: Miami's new sky-high splurge subhead, a $50 million penthouse with a 1,000-foot view. Here we go. First couple graphs. What's the value of a 1,000-foot view atop Miami's tallest condo tower in 2027? $50 million, perhaps. That's the price tag that developer Property Markets Group has just affixed to the top level of its yet unbuilt condo project, the Waldorf Astoria residence in Miami. The palatial 13,119 square foot apartment on a single story will include 6 bedrooms, 9 bathrooms, a wine room, library, a pool, a whole lot of entertaining and sitting rooms, in quotes. And the story goes on to say, oh yes, and the apartment's encased in floor-to-ceiling glass skin, the better to catch urban and water views from what's being built as Miami's first super tall condo tower at 1,049 feet. Oshrat, who the hell's going to buy it? What is the maintenance fee? Because you typically pay price per square foot per month based on your square footage. We're talking 13,119. We got some places going north of $2 a foot every single month. That's not tax deductible. And third of all, are they actually going to build it? What's the you?
Oh, it's being built. I mean, the foundation is being laid. It's being built.
Okay.
There's financing. It's going.
All right.
And there's deposits on 90% of the units. So I think at this point, if you have 4 years before this is done, you got 90% of the units. Why not 50 million? Let's see where it goes. I mean, that, so at this point, really, it really is one of those nothing to lose. Let's see where it goes. That said, I looked at some data. There have been quite a big jump of units that are priced 20 million and above. I think, again, 2021, that banner year with almost 300 of them.
Yep.
So when do you say when? Is it this one or is it the next one? But I mean, really, I think if you sold 90%, reach for the sky, quite literally, right?
No, in your piece, it goes on to say $3,800 per square foot is what the price would work at if the developer's able to achieve full ask. I can remember in the early 2000s, Jade on Brickell Bay is what it's called. When that thing went up, it broke the $500 square foot mark, and everybody said, "Oh my God, that's a lot." And then the last go around, you had the Faena house, which is breaking $3,000 a foot. Now, this one in downtown Miami, it's not on the water. It's located on Biscayne Boulevard. You got homeless guys sleeping around there. You got people stumbling, asking for change. They want $3,800 a square foot. What does the developer say to that price? Is that a good value, or are they charging a premium simply because of how palatial and spectacular this place is said to be?
And I haven't seen the other comps, but some of the other towers that are also going to be done in 2027 that are also kind of targeting that certain audience. I think according to the developer that's kind of in line with some of those units as well that are already selling. That this isn't really even that far out of line, somewhere in the threes. Have to go check the comps on that, but that's the rationale that was presented.
And one other point coming out of your piece, which I find very interesting. It says, and there's a quote, it says, the buyer profile in the Waldorf Astoria is different. It's not historic 80-90% South American. It's now 50% North American. It makes it broader market and more sustainable, which is what you want to see for a true world-class city. Oshrat, does that work if we go into recession? Having 50% North American investors?
Yeah, I mean, I guess then you got the other 50%. I got my New York hat on, so this is a new market to me, but I can tell you, sort of having been in New York for the luxury run up, I think after the recession in 2009, actually even during, like in 2010, you had people looking for something to invest in, that seemed safe. And so I think New York real estate felt tangible. So you had a lot of that global demand that was coming into New York. And it felt endless, and it was going on for about a good 2 or 3 years. And then that demand was satisfied. So, it feels like a lot of that's happening here now too, where you're looking for some kind of hard asset. You're looking for a market that seems like it's kind of on the upswing. So I imagine there's room to run. But as you say, so you got a 50-50 market. So maybe if there's a recession here, perhaps, someone in Europe is good, but I don't know. We'll see.
That's interesting. And the other point I would sort of point out is property taxes are 2%, generally speaking, of value. Let's say this thing trades at $50 million. You're looking at a tax bill of about $1 million a year. Mr. Fakler, you were talking about buying condos for 35 G's in the 1980s. Whoever buys this condo is looking at $1 million a year in property taxes. What say you, Mr. Fakler? This going to happen, or is this pie in the sky, top of the market bubble talk?
I think it's top of the market bubble talk. However, I wouldn't put it past Miami. I mean, this is, Jean mentioned it earlier in earlier segments, that this is a completely unique area for residential real estate.
And John, final question. Waldorf Astoria, does that have clout in South Florida?
Well, I mean, yeah, Waldorf Astoria is a global brand. The thing I always worry about is, if all these branded buildings, what happens when in 20 years when it doesn't have that brand anymore, or maybe the brand disappears, or maybe the contract for the brand runs out, or the building hasn't been maintained up to the brand standards, and you lose the brand cachet. What happens then?
Fantastic piece, Oshrat, and that's in your newsletter. Let me just remind everybody, highestinvest.beehive.com. We're going to put a link in the story notes. We'll also have it showing on the video. So with that being said, everyone, I want to thank you for participating in the podcast. I want to thank John Gruss, who's a journalist for over 25 years. Right now, his public relations and marketing firm called Gruss Communication. You can check out his website, which is GrussPR.com. GrussPR.com. You can also get him on X, which is formerly Twitter. Get him at John Gruss, JeanGruss. Also want to thank John Fakler. John was a journalist for over 20 years, wrote about white-collar crime, did business stories, also did restaurant reviews. I would encourage you to do a clip search, check out his restaurant reviews. Right now, he does public relations and marketing. If you want to get him on Twitter, or I guess formerly Twitter, now called X, get him at JT Fakler, JTFAKLER. And also want to thank Oshrat Carmiel. This is her maiden voyage. She did a wonderful job today. Hopefully she comes back and does it again with us. Make sure you go ahead and subscribe to her newsletter. You can get it at highestinvest.beehive. Beehive has got an interesting spelling. It's BEEHIIV.com. We'll have it in the story notes. We're also going to go ahead and have it posted on the video. And if you want to get a hold of Oshrat, you can get her on X, which is formerly Twitter. Let me give you the spelling, at OSHRATCARMIEL. And I'm Peter Zalewski of Condo Vultures. You have any questions? You have any comments? You have any criticism? Go ahead and send them to us. It's miami-rrp at miami-rrp. Remember, not AARP like Mr. Fakler, but actually Miami-RRP, which stands for Miami Reporters Roundtable Podcast. And let me remind you, if you want to get any merchandise, some of the merchandise that we have in Bar Superheroes, go to condovultures.com, look for the merch category. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you like us. Make sure you subscribe. And until next time, take care of yourself. Ciao, ciao.
It's a simple formula, and it works. Buy low, sell high. We're Condo Vultures, and when it comes to your real estate, we help you buy low. At Condo Vultures, we represent the buyer, and now's the time to buy. Log on to condovultures.com for more information. Condovultures.com. And remember, before you sell high, you have to buy low. Featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, 60 Minutes, and Time Magazine. Condo Vultures Realty, a licensed Florida real estate brokerage capitalizing on the condo correction since 2006.
This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. Before I started doing these podcasts, I was in the business of being a licensed real estate broker, a contributing columnist for the Miami Herald, as well as the Miami Real Deal, but also extra witness work in consulting. So if you are looking for an expert witness, or if you're looking for consulting services, a straight talk perspective as to what's going on in a particular marketplace, a building, or what happened previously, for whatever your situation is, whether you are an attorney, whether you are an institutional fund looking to invest, or whether you're a lender who's trying to come up with some sort of strategy and approach for your lending committee going forward, I just might be able to help you. To get a hold of me, please reach out to Peter at condovultures.com. That's Peter at condovultures.com, or give me a call to the office at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859.